Mark Rogers TV and SEC breakdown just a few minutes after Tennessee avoided what would be definitely the upset of the week, maybe the upset that would have held for the next 15 weeks in college football, but the Vols get it done at home in overtime over Appalachian State 20-13. We bring in Mike Loveall, who joins me along with Chad Niebling and David Waters here on SEC Breakdown, so please join us here, but also writes for Last Word on Sports and has gone through his grades. And I joked with Mike after the game, after I realized that he was still breathing and everything was okay, and I could kind of joke with him maybe that the grades would probably rate out D- across the board, but not necessarily the case, Mike.
No, Mark, not necessarily the case. Look, Appalachian State is a really good team. A lot of people, talk about this game coming in, talk about the quality of the upset, the possibility of upset. Look, Appalachian State's a good team. Nobody's saying there's not a good team, that they're not a good team. Tennessee should have played better, but if you look at Appalachian State, the system they run, the success they've had last year, their offensive powerhouse, the experience they have coming back. They're a very young FBS team, but Appalachian State's a very good team. They're a returning bowl-winning team.
Tennessee forces a 3-and-out right out of the gate defensively. App State punts, Cam Sutton fumbles, and it's almost the classic. That's what the underdog needed to kind of get things going.
No, you're absolutely right, Mark. That was just like you said. That's a classic set the tone play right there. I think Cam Sutton, Tennessee special teams is supposed to be a strength of their team. I think Cam Sutton was going to try to return that punt no matter how many people he had around him. Should have been a fair catch, but he wanted to make something happen. Fumbles the punt. Appalachian State gets really good field position. I think about the 35 of Tennessee. They're able to click off a couple first downs. They score. So not only is now Tennessee playing from behind, which I don't think affected them too much, but what it did do was it turned the field position. So instead of Tennessee having the ball about their own 40 and only having to go 6 yards, now they're down 7 and they get the ball at the 20. So they have to string together 6 or 7 first downs before they can get a touchdown, which obviously they weren't able to do. So one, it was a turnover, so it affected the psychology of the game. 2, it led to the 7 points. And 3, it really hampered Tennessee from a field position perspective for the whole first half.
Mike, for all the accolades poured upon Josh Dobbs, you sized it up here on SEC Breakdown, but also wrote an in-depth article in regards to analyzing his downfield throwing last season and what needs to be improved there. So your thoughts about that, and then you can just kind of take us through what else struck you in regards to your analysis of the Vols' effort.
Well, I think Dobbs played a very conservative game tonight. His passing was not very good. He did have the one deep ball, the 67-yard touchdown to Josh Malone that tied the score up. He had 2 really good passes on quick slants to the tight end. That's really Dobbs's bread and butter, that quick slant over the middle to the tight end. He's really a quarterback that really benefits from having a good pass-catching tight end. But if you look, there were a couple bad throws. Particularly late in the game, there was a screen to Jalen Hurd where they really needed a first down. Jalen Hurd had some room out there, and the pass was just about 5 yards short of Jalen Hurd's feet. The biggest, and then on Dobbs, to continue on Dobbs, he really didn't have a solid run performance tonight. It almost seems like they wanted to preserve him or limit his rushes from the run game perspective. But when you're dealing with a team like Appalachian State and you're down 10 at the half, I think you probably got to throw that conservatism out the window. That's the only one knock I would have against the offensive play calling, is not integrating Dobbs more in the running attack, particularly in the second half. From an offensive perspective, really what I noticed was the offensive line had a really poor performance. I graded them out as a D. Coleman Thomas had 2 penalties. Drew Richmond got better in the second half, but had a really shaky first half. Those offensive linemen really lost a lot of individual head-to-head battles. And for the most part, Appalachian State owned the line of scrimmage, particularly when Tennessee had the football. And that was the offensive line was expected to be the most improved unit coming out of summer camp this year. So that was probably, on offense, was probably the biggest thing I noticed and the biggest concern for me. I overall graded the offense as a C-, and the offensive line as a D. Really brought that grade down. On the plus side, I thought the receivers did a really good job. I didn't see any drop passes, maybe 1 or 2. I was talking to Chad, SEC Chad. about that. He said he saw a couple drop passes. I really didn't see anything that I would mark against the receivers. So opposite of last year, the receivers were really the most consistent offensive unit in this game to start the season for the Vols.
Yeah, it kind of bears out in the rushing numbers what you said about the offensive line play when Jalen Hurd and Alvin Kamara are both shy of 4 yards per carry. You can't completely go by the stats. You have to watch the game, but I don't know how else to shake that one out. And Josh Malone, 2 catches for 81 yards. You mentioned the big 67-yarder. Preston Williams, a guy that we talked about in the offseason as being integral to this passing game, kind of limited in regards to yards per reception, but 5 for 45. Ethan Wolf, 4 for 40. So defensively, you can't really look at the numbers and really fault the defense. They give up the short field touchdown, and then after that, a couple field goals, and it stayed 13-3 for a long time.
Yeah, no, good defensive effort tonight for the most part. I think Appalachian State, if I remember correctly, Appalachian State was only held to under 300 yards once last year against Clemson. I believe they finished with 292 total yards tonight, off the top of my head. So the defense did a couple things well. The defensive secondary was probably the best unit of the night. I gave the defensive backs a B+. Linebackers, the loss of Jalen Reeves-Maven was evident. Cortez McDowell came in, played better in the second half, missed a couple tackles that led to first downs. The defensive line I thought struggled a little bit. Here's the thing about the defensive line. When you prepare for a team like Appalachian State, they use a lot of cut blocking, and Jesse Palmer and Brent Musburger talked about this once or twice. But to me, it's almost like prepping for a triple option offense. It's one of those offenses that's very hard to prep for because of their blocking scheme and their blocking technique. A lot of teams use different blocking schemes, but they have a fairly unique blocking technique, and it's hard to replicate in practice. I thought the defensive line struggled with that. They didn't have as much disruption in the backfield of Appalachian State as I thought they would. And with an offense like Appalachian State, timing is very important to that offense. So the lack of disruption allowed them to have a pretty solid night running the game. The one stat that I'll tell you, for the defense, most of their stats were very good. The one stat that caused me concern was the first downs. They gave up 17 first downs. They allowed the Appalachian State offense to control the momentum of the game, control the pace of play, and keep the Tennessee offense on the sideline. So giving up those 17 first downs was kind of a bend but not break effort for the defense. But I would have liked to have seen them get off the field a little bit earlier a couple of times.
So, of course, we focus on Tennessee, but as you stated off the top, you got to credit App State, good game plan. The kids came out and played hard and obviously took it right to the wire. Josh Dobbs, I mentioned this to you before we started recording. Of course, there was a slight moment of just, wow, the game is really hanging in the balance when he put the ball on the field in overtime, what eventually turned out to be the recovery in the end zone for the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, you talked off the bat with a fumble about Cam Sutton. When you think about Appalachian State, obviously the first thing everyone thinks of is the upset of Michigan 9 years ago when they were the FCS team and Michigan was 5th ranked. Cam Sutton fumbles the ball on the 4th play of the game, and everybody thinks, oh, here we go again. So you have that. Appalachian State's that one team that probably no big-time FBS team wants to play, because every time they play a Clemson or a Tennessee, particularly early in the season, all you're going to hear about is the upset of Michigan 9 years ago. So any breaks that don't go your way, whether it's the Cam Sutton fumble, Josh Dobbs fumbling in the end zone in overtime, you're thinking to yourself, if you're a fan of Tennessee, you're thinking to yourself, oh no, are we going to be the next Michigan? So that's the downside of scheduling Appalachian State on your schedule. But yeah, they came in with a great game plan. They executed very well. I think I have to go back and look at the stats, but I only remember 2 penalties up until the last, I think, drive of the game, or maybe till overtime. They had one, I think, on the first play of the game. And I think they went 2 full quarters without a penalty. So they played an almost flawless game, and then their quarterback threw an interception. So for the better part of 3 quarters, after the first drive until the 4th quarter started, Appalachian State played a pretty flawless game, which is what they had to play if they were going to hang in there. And they did that. Great effort by Appalachian State, take nothing away from them. But Tennessee was able to hang on and survive a very tough opening night contest.
Mike, much of our conversation last week focused on the psyche of this football team, and we were looking ahead 3 weeks to the Florida game and the make or break status there. there's a situation now where they survive what easily could have been a loss. So do they buckle down and say, let's go get them and really fire off against Virginia Tech? Or is there a doubt placed in their mind about how good they are? You can't answer that question, but it's an interesting psyche type of moment and week preparation now for a decent Virginia Tech team.
Yeah, no, I give the coaches a C overall. You can kind of critique some of the play calling from DeBoer, and you can kind of critique some of the defensive effort and play and schemes from DeBoer, the new defensive coordinator Bob Sheep, particularly the wheel route covered by the defensive end. But here's the thing I took away most importantly. Late in the fourth quarter and in overtime, Tennessee seemed to be the much more confident team, and they seemed a little bit more relaxed. They didn't get into they didn't tighten up. They didn't stress out. They went out and they executed, and they did what they had to do to win the game. That's different than last year. Remember, everything this offseason was about how Tennessee blew fourth quarter leads and choked in the fourth quarter. Tonight, while they didn't play very well, from a mental aspect, from a psychological aspect, the team looked much more confident and much more comfortable in the fourth quarter and in overtime. They never seemed to kind of tighten up in the early third quarter, mid third quarter when they weren't able to tie the score up quickly. So that's a positive I took away, particularly for the coaching staff. I think they were focused, and I think Butch Jones has them prepared and expecting to win and ready to handle those stressful situations late in the fourth quarter. I think next week, battle at Bristol against Virginia Tech, I think Tennessee matches up against Virginia Tech much better. The strength of Tennessee's defense tonight was its secondary. I think against a Fuente pass-heavy offense, I think Tennessee is going to match up a little bit better. I think Tennessee will parlay this. They have 10 days now to get ready for the game as opposed to a 6-day practice week. I think Tennessee is going to parlay this. I think they're going to get better this week, and I think they're going to be okay. I don't think this game signals the end of the road for Tennessee's championship hopes. I think it's something they're going to be able to build off of.
I was getting text messages that Tennessee's overrated, and I was like, whoa, hang on. It's one game. It's one game. They're 9th rated. Who cares what happens in the polls this week? It doesn't matter. The nation, the college football world's going to be able to see them play that Virginia Tech game. It's an ABC night game at 8 o'clock Eastern time. Mike Loveall and myself, along with Chad Niebling and David Waters, are the core of SEC Breakdown. So please join us on Twitter and Facebook and right here on Mark Rogers TV as well, depending on where you're catching this video podcast. Great breakdown, Mike. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.